Nothing makes sense with Pokemon cards anymore, and we've even reached new lows with naming a card as Booger Mew. Don't even get me started on that one. But before we get into this video topic, I'm actually gifting one subscriber this Team Rocket's Murkrow. Now to know if you won, if I reply to your comment with this Umbreon emoji, then congratulations, this card is being sent your way. But I mean, what's actually happening right now? Because this sure makes little to no sense. I mean, one thing I'm noticing is that people are getting hyper fixated on the weirdest stuff. Like now it seems that just any Pokemon card in existence can get hyped at any given time, and it's getting really strange because it feels a little bit fake in a way. I mean, I probably should get the big one out of the way, and the reason why this video even exists is because of the whole one that's called Booger Mew. And I mean, man, I'm actually so mad at the community for giving it that name. I'm so mad at myself for the fact that I need to even call it that. I mean, in all my years, I've never seen such a shit name. But nonetheless, we are here, and I feel like a banana saying it, but you know, the Solosis has just climbed up in a huge wave of hype, and also it is another card from Black Bolt because we also had the Seismitoad, and you know, Black Bolt is proving to be the better set out of both Black Bolt and White Flare, but I imagine as the years continue, the gap between these two will become pretty big. Now here's the thing, the whole reason why Booger Mew is climbing so much in price is because of the artist USGMEN, and I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right, though this is the illustrator of the iconic Bubble Mew. And now the illustrator has developed a little bit of a cult-like following within the fandom. Now they're actually quite a new illustrator in the Pokemon scene, and their first ever card illustration was Bubble Mew. But you know, with that creation, they've kind of had the baptism of fire, and now the community has decided that it's all time to get hyped around that specific card. And you know, Solosis seems to be catching that hype wave, and even Clobbopus has even got caught in this wave, and they're all both by the same illustrator as Bubble Mew. Now, I dare say we may be entering another Shinji Kanda scenario, because I mean, if you're unaware, Shinji Kanda cards and literally anything that's illustrated by Shinji Kanda gets super high prices because of the following that's been created for his amazing artworks, and I think the same is happening here as well. Though I mean, check some of these out and you can see some of the bizarre prices happening at the moment. All right, check it out. Big, you know, hype price swings, hype movements, things are just changing. Anyway, the Solosis, and am I gonna say it again? I mean, I'm just in this, the Booger Mew, which we're looking at right now, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, has climbed up quite a ridiculous amount. Now, honestly, the artwork is cool, and you know, the illustrator has got, you know, a unique art style as well, but of course you can see that there is some massive hype around this card. And like I just mentioned before, I do think we have a scenario playing out kind of like with Shinji Kanda. I feel right now, especially going into 2025 and 2026, I feel there is, you know, more seasoned collectors now, and now people are getting more interested in just things other than the Pokemon, you know, when the whole hype wave started in 2020, it was all just about, oh, just Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, you know, it was all about the big Pokemon. But now as people are getting deeper into collecting, there's almost having these pockets of what people are finding interesting. Now people aren't just saying, hey, I'm interested in just Pokemon cards in general. Now people are saying, hey, I'm really interested in the illustrator behind these card artworks. It's literally becoming like art collecting right now. But anyway, looking at the Solosis right there, you can see it was selling for $11 in September of this year. Then it had a huge spike all the way to 67 USD for an illustration rare. Pretty, you know, insane prices for that. And of course, right now it is retracing a little bit, selling at $51. Now, if it's your first time in these hype waves, this is very common that happens. A lot of people just jump on a card and they think it's gonna continue rising indefinitely because, you know, they get all caught in this hype swing. If you do watch a lot of my videos, I always talk about when you see these hype swings happen, just take a step back because, you know, it can be a little bit inauthentic, and there also can be a little bit of like, you know, hype breeds hype, right? It just becomes an interesting topic. I mean, right now, the Solosis, no one would even be talking about it, but you know, because, you know, now that it's kind of getting, you know, rising in price, now even I'm making a video about it, all these content creators are talking about it, the hype builds, and then people start paying, you know, ridiculous prices for it because it's in the kind of limelight. But it's kind of falling out of the limelight, and that's why I didn't really want to talk about it in that huge upward swing, because I could see how much it was climbing, and it was just like, you know what, let this one just die down a bit. And you can see it has retraced a little bit. I do imagine that this Solosis will come down a fair bit more. Main reason for that is it just doesn't feel that authentic like other cards. When I looked at Bubble Mew, the reason why that climbed so much in price, it was new, it was fresh, it was a shiny variation, you know, really awesome artwork. This just feels like, oh yeah, same illustrator, cool, it's got a little bit of a meme about it, why not, let's get this card rising. When the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved started climbing up, that was unique, that was fresh, even though it was a Shinji Kanda artwork from Lost Origin Giratina, the same illustrator, it did feel a bit more interesting as an artwork. This one definitely feels like it's just been kind of like a copy stamp effect, and I do imagine it's going to continue to drop. Now, another one is the Clobbopus as well, which is also from the same illustrator as Bubble Mew, and of course the Solosis, and we're looking right now, selling for $5 in August, went all the way up to $25 when that whole hype was happening, but you can see selling for $14 right now, so you know, that's a pretty significant drop in price quite quickly, and of course, like I said, it just doesn't have that unique, you know, fan demand. It's just getting pulled in by like anyone at this stage, and that's the little thing you need to worry about, right? If you do collect Pokemon cards, one thing you always need to be very wary of is these hype trains and these hype swings, and I talk about this a lot. You know, if you are a regular viewer, you'll know that, you know, Phil, you know, myself, I always talk about that, you know, do not just get sucked in when these massive hype trains happen, because, you know, you will get disappointed, and of course you can lose a fair bit of money if you're just climbing, you know, what everyone's chasing. It's much better to buy cards you actually like and cards you want in your collection, because you will avoid any of that banana crap right there. And of course, moving on to the Mew from Paldea Fates, which kind of started this whole new love for, you know, the illustrator for these artworks. But of course, the Bubble Mew is right now selling for $646 US. I'm going to pull this into the year graph because this card has just had a wild journey as a Pokemon card. And you know, it is really interesting to see the movements. Last year around this time, it was selling for $120. Found a market high for $421, and then it kind of dropped down to $292. Right then, a lot of people said, you know what, this card's too cheap, and you can see right there, climbed all the way up to $700 US, and right now selling for $645. So a little bit of some backwards pressure has happened for Bubble Mew. I do think at that price, to be honest, I'm finding Bubble Mew a little bit overpriced at the moment. I think the $450 to $500 mark seemed like a fair price. I still think $645 at this stage is a little bit overs. Of course, that's my opinion. The market decides this stuff. You know, like I said, a lot of people might think that this card is going to become the most iconic card from the Scarlet and Violet era, but to me, it is a little bit overs at this stage. Right now, I do think a bit more of a price retrace can happen. Right now, we're approaching the winter period. During that time for US and Europe, that's usually when card prices start climbing as well. So we are actually entering the season where, you know, card prices are going to rise. So yeah, I don't know where this card's going to go. You know, like I said, it is quite expensive, but of course, anything can happen with Pokemon cards and how they behave. Now, moving on to the Giratina V. Now, this is really interesting. Like I said, you can see that the Bubble Mew is selling for $645, but you can see the Giratina V, which is arguably even harder to pull than the Bubble Mew, is right now selling for $629 from, you know, Lost Origin as well, which came out 2 years before Paldea Fates. Well, not really. It came out in 2022 and Paldea Fates came out in 2024, but Paldea Fates came out in January and I think Lost Origin came out in like September of 2022. So not quite 2 years exactly, but you know, there is a bit of time difference between these. But you know, when I'm looking at the Giratina V, to me, the Giratina V is a far more rare card and it's probably a more desirable card as well because, you know, it is from the Sword and Shield era, not as many sets were being printed like now. So, you know, this is more of a rare card, but you can see the Bubble Mew is even more expensive than that. So really interesting to see those comparables. And when you kind of look at it, and this is the thing about Pokemon cards, if you try to like put logic sometimes in why some cards are expensive and why they're not, that's when you just go like, you know what, none of this is making sense. So that's why you just got to keep an eye on it. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved. Check this one out, dude. Selling for $245 US. Right now, this card is selling for $400. That is wild pricing, man. Cannot believe that. Massive price growth for this card. Not only is this card very expensive as a raw card, but if you do know, the PSA 10 version for this card is incredibly difficult to get. It has a 18% chance to get returned as a PSA 10. So not only is this card expensive raw, if you do get this card returned as a PSA 10, which is very unlikely, the prices for the PSA 10 version are very high. So you can see massive kind of different things happening at the moment with the market. This card as well is really climbing up. And again, it is an illustration rare, which makes it all that much more interesting. Now, moving on to some other hyped cards. Again, we're talking about the Shinji Kanda cards. And like I said, we had the Giratina V, we just had the Magikarp, and now we got the Seismitoad. You can see this card selling for $72 when it released, went all the way up to $227, right now selling for $215. Now, history can repeat itself because the Magikarp Magikarp is going up to $400. People can look at this Seismitoad and say, you know what? Hey, it's a Shinji Kanda artwork. It's going to follow the same trajectory. The only difference with this is that Magikarp is a very nostalgic Pokemon for nearly every single person collecting because, of course, if you played the early Pokemon games and if you still play Pokemon, you know, if you fish with a rod, it is very likely you're going to get a Magikarp, and it has a big status and it's an iconic Pokemon, okay? Magikarp is very well known, one of the most famous Pokemon of all time. When it comes to Seismitoad, that's when it shifts a little bit. Seismitoad doesn't have that status. In fact, I don't think even a lot of people that don't play the games would even know of Seismitoad if it wasn't for this card, especially with the amount of new collectors coming in and, you know, they're not really that much involved in the video games as well. A lot of people probably wouldn't even know of this Pokemon, okay? Magikarp is known by nearly every single person who knows of Pokemon. Most people know of Magikarp, whereas the Seismitoad, more of a hidden little gem. For that reason, because it's not as an iconic of a Pokemon as Magikarp, there could be a little bit of a delay in how quick it rises. But interestingly, Black Bolt and White Flare are becoming unique sets, but you know, Black Bolt to me does seem like the better set in terms of the kind of library of cards and how valued they are. You do have the whole Solosis there as well. You know, you got the Seismitoad, and of course, I love the Zekrom Special Illustration Rare as well. But you can see Black Bolt currently selling for around $86 in ETB. That is still much more expensive than what we were paying for ETBs in like mid 2024. But of course, you know, at least it is not at that crazy prices of like Prismatic Evolutions ETBs, which is selling for around 130 US in ETB. And we can see White Flare selling for $82 in ETB, which is pretty interesting because there's only a $4 difference between them. But you know, I think as the time goes on and as the years go on, the price difference between these two may get a bit bigger, but something that could happen as well, because a lot of people are anticipating that Black Bolt will be the more expensive set. A lot of people may be writing off White Flare, and then you may have a little bit of a situation where more people are hoarding Black Bolt, and because a lot of people written off White Flare, there could be a big price discrepancy between the two where White Flare is more expensive. That actually happens a lot. Skyridge is a big example of that because back in 2003, Skyridge wasn't that loved of a set, but of course now it's one of the most iconic Pokemon sets of all time. Now, in terms of these two, the monochromatic cards from these two are very, very interesting. Now, something that I did predict, and the reason why I did predict this is because monochromatic cards just don't have that long-term status where usually if it's more of a unique artwork, people are more gravitated towards it. The monochromatic cards, to me, I always felt like they won't hold their price points. So we can see right there that the monochromatic cards from these two sets are coming down in price. And I did say that for a long time because, you know, they just don't have that huge demand where it's a unique artwork and it's that memorable. It just kind of feels a little bit more lazy, if you know, for lack of a better word. It doesn't really feel that inspired. And for that reason, we can see that they are dropping. The Reshiram card was selling for $500 when it released, right now selling for $371. Not surprised at that at all, because like I said, even though these are so rare to pull, they aren't that unique as an artwork, and I don't think they're gonna really pull in the masses. It's more that you really need to know how rare the card is rather than it being such a unique art. The problem with these monochromatic cards is that you need to know why they're rare. If you have to research the card why it's rare, that already kind of damages its future potential. What I mean by that is when you look at Moonbryon or when you look at Bubble Mew, you don't even need to know that card's rare because it is just such an obviously cool artwork. With these monochromatic cards, no one's ever gonna say, wow, they're such amazing cards. It's more that you look at it and you say, hey, I know these are so hard to pull. I know how rare these are, hence why they are valuable. So for that reason, I never felt that these would hold in the market. You can also see the Zekrom as well, selling for $486. Right now selling for $418. Doing a little bit better than the Reshiram, but I do imagine as well that it will be hard for them to hold these price points, especially as Black Bolt and White Flare ETBs aren't at some huge price points either. Also, it's probably best that you don't get sucked into all this hype, but if you do, it's okay. Just be wary. Though if you do have some questions, and if you are new to the Pokemon's TCG, just drop any of your questions in my channel's Discord server. We have over 10,000 members, and there's always members willing to help out. The server invite is in the video's description. And you know, when talking about the Mega Evolution sets, we can see the Mega Gardevoir Gold card selling for $488, right now selling for $580. Maybe a similar scenario will happen with these because, like as I mentioned with the Surging Sparks Gold Pikachu, these kind of monochromatic monochromatic cards just don't get that long-term performance. They're more of a thing where everyone's hyped and everyone knows the pull rates and everyone's excited. And then as time goes on and, people just remember it, maybe these won't hold. I'm not too sure at this stage. They are very, very hard to pull. But, what we really need is Pokemon to start doing gold cards like they did in Crown Zenith. That is such an awesome way to do these monochromatic gold cards. That brought so much life to the cards. When I look at those gold cards and then I look at these, it is like comparing apples to oranges. They are so much better, the Crown Zenith cards, than these gold cards in particular. And I think there is a little bit of a kind of complacency happening with Pokemon at the moment. Same thing when we look at the Mega Lucario, selling for $545 on release, right now selling for $700 US. Super expensive. When you look at the pull rates, these are some of the hardest Pokemon cards to pull in history. But at the same time, when I look at that, imagine if these artworks were more similar to the Crown Zenith style of Pokemon cards in terms of that gold artwork. That's how I think the monochromatic cards should be. They should get much more of a unique artwork than just having this kind of Pokemon that feels like it's just printed on a card and it has like a gold coating on it. Here's the big thing as well. This is the reason why Dragon Ball, a lot of people get annoyed with Fusion World and then you have Dragon Ball Masters, right? A lot of people got annoyed with Fusion World because it just felt like it's like literally a copy, like a photo you took of like Vegeta or a photo you took of Goku and you just put it on a card artwork. It doesn't feel like it's in a battle position. But then when you look at Dragon Ball Masters, the artworks are so well designed. They look like they're in battle positions. It's much more unique. I kind of feel the same with this. When I look at other cards that have unique artworks, like the Mega Lucario Special Illustration Rare, that to me looks like you're actually immersed in the world. Whereas when I look at this, it does feel a little bit uninspired, like I mentioned before. But nonetheless, very interesting cards, though of course they can also hold their price as well, given how rare they are. But I think these price swings are just weird movements, and it is bringing up a question relating to Pokemon's future, and I think there's a lot of areas that are being avoided right now. And what I mean by that can actually be seen within this video on screen right here. Within this video, I actually do a deep dive of what's actually happening with Pokemon cards right now, and especially what's going to happen in the future. If you enjoyed this video, definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel, click the video that's appearing on screen, and I'll see you on the next video.